Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Modern Classrooms Project podcast. My name is Kareem and I am the founder and executive director of the Modern Classrooms Project. I'm joined by two wonderful guests today, Nora, Barnett, and Doty. And today we're going to be digging into this concept of how you actually plan a modern classroom. A lot of our listeners have asked to share a little bit more about the nitty-gritty experience of what it's like to actually build your instructional videos, create those self-pacing structures, grade, how much time are people spending? Does it get easier over time? So today we're going to dig into those exact concepts and spend some time clarifying how modern classrooms educators do this and how modern classrooms coaches do this. Explain a little bit about what the feeling was like when you kind of sat. I know it was you in a classroom in our fellowship saying, okay, I got to take this math unit and transform it into a totally different approach to teaching and learning. What was that journey like initially?
That's a great question. Well, it was definitely scary and overwhelming. Those are the two words that come to mind right away. I remember, as you said, sitting in that classroom feeling like, how am I going to do this? But I think it very much mirrors modern classrooms in that I was able to break it down into like bite-sized pieces, which was really, really helpful. I think the first day I just spent like a long time just going through an example unit, which was really helpful too, to see, yeah, it sounds really overwhelming and there's so many different parts to it, but it's actually, you can do it. You just have to break it down into bite-sized steps and think about each part separately. So that was really, really great to see. And I think anything is overwhelming when you're first starting. And if you just don't let that get in the way and then really focus on each piece and putting it together in the end, I think that makes it a lot more manageable.
So I'm glad that you mentioned the COVID-19 part because I know that I've referenced that. And in the beginning, that was honestly kind of why I was on the hunt. But the more I got into it, the more just these aha moments were coming up. And I used to teach ELA, 8th grade English language arts, and I just immediately thought, oh my goodness, this is not just a solution for COVID school. This is an all-time solution for really fantastic teaching and learning, and I can multiply myself. And I immediately started thinking, holy cow, I want to use this a lot. So definitely cool.
And I'm glad you brought that up. It's so interesting because so many people have jumped into our free course during COVID-19. Literally 18,000 educators have dove headfirst into our course during COVID-19. And it's just so important for listeners to know, like, we're not a COVID-19 model. We're not a distance learning model. We are a model that people can certainly make use of during this time, and it undoubtedly helps. But like ultimately, it's at its best in person. Lisa, can you talk a little bit about your experience? Did you also start with the end in mind? Are your teachers starting with the end in mind? Like, how are they attacking units?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, like any other unit, I planned my big PD unit based off of feedback that I got from the spring. And with the end in mind is that ultimately, if teachers needed to go fully remote, and right now we're in a hybrid mode, but if they did, how could they teach and students learn just in a seamless way? So that was my end goal. Also, what I kept in mind was all the feedback from the parents, from students, from my colleagues about what their needs and their wants were from the spring. And so I pushed those together. And, I'm not a classroom teacher using, classroom standards, but I did use standards from the Universal Design for Learning on what best practices were for digital platforms. So I referred to those standards to get everything on the same page, make sure that we had a universal look to what we were creating for students and the families who support them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And just to contextualize for everyone, the unit that Lisa completed was actually a teacher-facing unit. She revolutionized teacher PD around our model, and it uses the same principles.
So like Nora and like you, actually, I really liked using the slides and my guided notes to help me plan my video. And so I would get those materials ready to go, and then I would have a better picture of how my video needed to go. I didn't use color, though I did use a standard template. I liked the template in the exemplar content, so I used that one and adjusted it slightly. So the teachers would know there's an intro slide, there's a question objective that we're trying to answer for that video, that I would revisit that question at the end of my video. The challenge for me was paring it down and trying to get from my previous way too long down to that 6-minute mark. And it actually helped me to be more efficient with my thoughts and really put myself in the learner's shoes, that I can convey the information in a better, more efficient way. So I planned better notes and got quickly, to the point. So that was what I did personally. Just yesterday, I was in a classroom where a teacher color codes her lessons so that as she's walking around and students are working, she can at a glance tell who's on what, and that helps make her time a little bit more efficient too.
I love that. And it's so interesting when you talk about this idea of keeping the videos short. I mean, it's arguably the most challenging part. Nora, was that part really challenging for you? I know it kind of depends on content area and grade level. Did you find it difficult to keep your videos short?
Definitely. But I think the biggest thing that helped me with that was realizing that maybe I was trying to do too much in a video. And if I could kind of split it up even more into like 2 shorter videos, I think that was even better. And I think also just spending time planning beforehand, as I said before, is really powerful. If you have your slides set up, I know, Kareem, you said you only had a few slides for every video. If you only have a few, you can't have your video go on forever.
I know you're coaching educators. How are they using mastery checks? Are most of them building one, multiple versions? Does it depend on content areas? Are they using digital tools for mastery checks? Are they paper-based? What are you currently seeing?
I'm seeing both digital and paper-based. The math, I'm seeing a little bit more paper-based, and they have a turn-in tray, and when they've demonstrated mastery, I think most of them are using about an 80% mark in their daily work, assignments, and practice. And then they're ready for that mastery check, and that's how the math is using it. I've seen in an English room, they are demonstrating like a writing prompt and actually crafting a response to a question in a paragraph form in a Google Doc. And so the teachers will walk through and look and talk about the different points in their document. So I've seen both. I've also heard of some teachers using like a one-on-one where they're pulling them back and having conversations with them, and the student articulates that they have mastery of the concept and then are ready to move on to the next lesson.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I'm glad you brought that up. A lot of folks will ask about the mastery checks because they worry about building multiple versions, and then they worry about how to do it effectively in a timely fashion. And I think one of the most important things to remember for listeners out there is, first of all, it's very content specific. A lot of times those English classrooms, those history classrooms will do one mastery check per lesson, but it's revisable. It's often a written piece. Lots of folks will use oral delivery, one-on-one conversations. And then in some cases, it's just cut and dry, like a few questions. You get it wrong, you take a different one, same skill, different questions. Now, I know, Nora, that's actually more aligned to how your mastery checks usually work, right? You usually do same skill, but 3 or 4 versions. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. I'm teaching virtually right now, but in person, I usually have like a half piece of paper, and I have version 1 on the front and then version 2 on the back. So it's really easy for kids. If they do make a mistake, they have a second version readily available to them. But what I actually have started doing with mastery checks, again, this is in the classroom, is having kids correct their mistakes even on their incorrect mastery check before they even try the second version, just to really I talk a lot about growth mindset in my classroom and focusing on celebrating mistakes and how even those mistakes on the mastery checks can be a learning experience, and how they can use that to then help them do that much better on the second version that they take. First of all, I create all of my lessons. So I have a list of the lessons, all the skills that I want to cover. And then once I have that kind of general broad picture, then I can go through and think about what are like the most necessary, what are the must-do skills that I want every single one of my students to cover. Seeing that holistic picture has been really helpful for me to pick out which ones are kind of allow kids to do a little more creative work and the should do and aspire to do more challenging problem. So I definitely create those afterward. And I do make them public to my students, but I tell students individually when I want them to skip a lesson or not.
Got it.
And I have found that later on in units, that's when I might have to change a classification if I think, oh, we're a little bit farther behind, or, that skill might actually be adding a little something else that students don't fundamentally need. And then I will change that. So I'm definitely changing those throughout a unit. I think in so much of modern classrooms, adjusting is so powerful. And if one thing works in one unit, it might not work in another. And just being flexible with that, I think is a really good mindset to have.
It's core to our work. It's something we believe in so deeply, is ensuring that educators know that they are the masters in the room and they need to pivot in the ways that they think it's going to work most effectively. So adjusting in that way is powerful. Nora, can you speak a little bit to when you grade and how much of your planning time is devoted to grading?
Well, I try to I try to grade a lot actually in the class. Whenever possible. I think that's really powerful to get that immediate feedback to kids. Obviously that it's not always possible, because if I'm talking to a kid, I can't be grading. So I try to balance that. Whatever grading I can't do in the actual classroom with students, I will grade right after class. And then I can update the progress tracker as soon as possible. That's become a lot more important as I'm teaching virtually, so that kids can be accessing that progress tracker whenever to catch up on work that they're missing or behind on, or just need to finish a lesson for.
And do you grade every assignment and every mastery check? I mean, I know I made sure to always grade mastery checks. That was a non-negotiable for me. But with assignments, I would oftentimes spot check them. I wouldn't necessarily dig too deep into them. And I would usually think about the students that I knew were struggling with the content and watch their assignments more closely. But if I knew a kid was comfortably moving through the material, getting mastery checks right, I would oftentimes just spot check to make that time move by faster. Is that how you approach it, or are you very detail oriented and hit everything?
I actually hit everything. And I want my students to get 100% accuracy on the assignments and the mastery checks. So I will have students revise assignments and mastery checks to make sure everything is correct. That being said, if a student has mismultiplied or misadded and I can see their work, I won't have them go back and correct that. But I do grade everything. So it definitely is time consuming. But I think it's the source of a lot of really meaningful conversations with kids. I will just say that my workload, my second year, is sizably smaller. It is much, much smaller. In terms of planning, I'm definitely doing a lot of grading, but I already have videos and slides and assignments already created. So a lot of that planning work for me right now is just tweaking things. And I'm always kind of amazed at how well I can remember which problem tripped kids up, or which little things I had to re-explain from a year ago, but I somehow remember those things. So there are a few videos that I've re-recorded or added a few to break up skills. So I'm definitely still making videos, but it is a much smaller amount of planning I'm doing in that kind of front end.
Yeah.
So it's been really nice to have that already done. Really, really nice.
Thank you so much for listening. Listeners, remember you can always email us at podcast@modernclassrooms.org, and you can find the links to topics and tools we discussed, as well as more info on this week's announcements and events, in the show notes for this episode at podcast.modernclassrooms.org. We'll have this episode's recap and transcript uploaded to the Modern Classrooms blog on Friday, so be sure to check there or check back in the show notes for this episode if you'd like to access those. And if you enjoy our podcast and it's been helpful in supporting you to create a blended, self-paced, mastery-based learning environment, we would love if you could leave a review. That does help other folks find our podcast. And of course, you can always learn the essentials of our model, if you want to go beyond the podcast, through our free course at learn.modernclassrooms.org. And you can follow us on social media at modernclassproj. That's PROJ. We are so appreciative of all the hard work you do for students and schools. Have a great week, and we'll be back next Sunday with another episode of the Modern Classrooms Project podcast.